Get started with our budget work session, and we have Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance, to lead our discussion. Thank you.
Good evening. We'll go through just a quick kind of, some of this is a repeat, but we'll go through a little bit of legislative and then budget, and allow you to have discussion and questions that'll hopefully, anyway. The legislature did pass a bill, House substitute for Senate Bill 61. So we do have a finance formula leading into 1819. The base state aid looks like this. So currently we're at 4,006. What was passed puts us at 4,165. The asterisk just refers down to what, if current law had gone into effect, it would have been 4,128. So this is what the bill reads. And then these would be the increases going forward. And then following 22, 23, it'll be increased by CPI. The local option budget, the formula is going to remain the same. Districts that want to go above 30% have to publish their resolution, have the right to petition. Districts that were previously approved for 33%, like Lawrence, get to retain that authority, so that part didn't change. They are going to change the way the state aid is computed so that there is that equity piece to it. So that was something that was good, what we wanted them to do. The formula calculation for the LOB remains basically the same as it does currently. It does have a false base of the 4490, and then after 1819, that base will actually start increasing with the CPI. Currently, that base was going to stay at 4490 till the regular base got caught up to it. And I think because the gap is still so big that they've put that in there. It does repeal the provision that would count 15 percentage points of the LOB as part of general fund. So they kind of had that false base of 4,900 they were using at the time connected to that. So that went away. It does provide where districts, if they wanted to, could have a minimum of a 15% LOB without having to do some of the voting and petitioning, those kinds of things, but it's not incorporated within the general fund. So things look a lot like they do currently, other than that base amount has gone up. The CTE weighting, there's really no change in that. It's basically the exact same as current. Bilingual weighting is going to be the same. It's going to be based on current. They did amend the law to require a proportionate share of general fund weighting for bilingual to also be applied as LOB. So example, if bilingual is 5% of the general fund, then 5% of our LOB will have to be also transferred to bilingual. That is true with the at-risk as well. So the high density will be extended through 2020. The 10% floor for free lunch was repealed. And then it also amended the law to require the proportionate share. So, you know, again, an example, 10% of general fund, then 10% of your LOB is going to need to be transferred to the at-risk fund as well. So that is a change that does require an accounting of at-risk and bilingual money that matches that. And so we'll have to make sure we do that. And we haven't seen or know what those best practice guidelines will be for going into next year. But those will be what we'll have to use to actually demonstrate the use of the at-risk money in the appropriate place. Special education, those funds will be increased kind of the way it's the bills previously to this one were noting about 44 million, and then money after that. KSDE has estimated that's about 31,250 per FTE of categorical aid, up from the 28,250. They won't officially give us a number until they kind of get into budget workshops, which will probably be after the courts to decide. So that's still to be determined, but we're kind of using that amount as an estimate. Transportation, they just really kind of fixed the statute to match up with practice, and so that's all this is saying. That was kind of already out there, and they've kept that part in there. Early childhood, they're still looking to increase state aid funding for that $2 million mark. Our early childhood 4-year-old is based on the 75 students, based on actual audit, and half of that is what we get for an FTE. This does increase the state aid to start addressing 3-year-olds. Currently, it's just 4-year-olds, so that will be something that programmatically, as the state looks at that, could impact how our early childhood, but it also helps bridge that age that's kind of been missing when you look at parents as teachers and tiny K, and then you look at our 4-year-old, those 3-year-olds were kind of missed in that, and so this is sort of giving some funding to help maybe bridge some of that gap. And so, that'll be an evolution of how they apply that into the different funding. A few of these others we've talked about, and they didn't really change. The capital outlay, they did repeal the utility and property and casualty from capital outlay, which is what the courts had asked them to do because it wasn't equitable, and we weren't trying to do that anyway, so that didn't impact us. They did adjust the bond cap so that people don't get stuck not being able to move ahead with some bond issues based on the way the cap was written. And so now we're kind of into those budget considerations. So really, I just kind of the high points of the bills is all those were. You've heard most of them. I just wanted to kind of, those are officially in what was approved. So we're going to go into the budget considerations unless you don't have any questions about that part. We've talked about these on the 9th meeting and the 23rd meeting. ELT has taken feedback from the board and discussed, at length the different budget considerations and funding available to the district for 18-19. Legislature has passed a school finance plan for 18-19 that's going to go to the courts for review. Oral arguments are scheduled around May 22nd, and the courts say they'll decide by June 30. So as far as us knowing anything official, it probably will be June 30. We don't anticipate the state giving us documents for budgets, workshops, any of those things till after the courts decide. Last year, the courts took so long, they did go ahead and give us forms ahead of time, and we still kind of got into special meeting circumstances due to the lateness of everything. Hopefully, the courts will decide by that June 30 date, so we're not quite so late in the process, but we're kind of on that same timeline schedule as we were before. So hopefully with our discussions tonight, we want them to be around the funding from the legislative action and then to try to establish a draft plan that can be up for final consideration once the courts rule. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. There is an item on the agenda. You may wish to have some action items tonight, and if not, they may be at a future time and won't be tonight, but it's on the agenda as a follow-up in case there's some action out of our work session that you want to proceed with. So looking at the full impact of the finance bill, when I run it through the Form 150 based on the information that has been provided to date, noting that KSDE projections considered our new facility money to be exactly the same as it is now, and we are in fact decreasing significantly in that area, we still end up with about $4.2 million as planning money that we can look at between what we're anticipating on the regular general fund, special education, and LOB. Based on all of that, that looks to be currently, which is very close to kind of what we were, I think we were at about 4.3, so we're within that same ballpark. And again, subject to change. This is just our planning estimate based on kind of running things through the formula ahead of any budget worksheets or formulas or things like that being solidified by the state. When you look at off the top, the first thing that we usually look at or have to consider is what do our staffing ratios do to us based on enrollment. So what is our enrollment going to be at middle, high, elementary, and what, applying exactly the same ratios, do we have changes or needs? Elementary was flat. We didn't need to do anything. Middle school, we need to do a little bit. High school, a little bit more, because that's where some of our growth has kind of jumped to. CTE, and then the way ESL works, there's a slight decrease. So those were the changes that we need to do to the budget based on staffing ratios and existing enrollment, the way it applied. And the net effect of all of that is $159,599. The next thing we kind of looked at were additions, but they were offset by reductions. So the net impact of this is the zero. But what we looked at and what has kind of been to date are looking at adding those 3 elementary, and we took it out of contingency at elementary, adding the 0.4 of AVID at 7th grade and taking it out of their contingency. The high school did 2 social workers and reduced their contingency. So those all net. The orange are some things that we talked about in our ELT team meetings. that really are things we needed to do, and how could we move ahead with those with a net budget impact. And so what you're seeing is the 0.5 of the deaf, hard of hearing teacher, the categorical aid, and then we're going to use federal Medicaid funds money to offset the difference. So the net effect is zero to the budget going forward, because those are things that we just need to do. They need to get hired, and we really can't wait. And so those are things that are going to be funded through Medicaid going into next year, and maybe something that comes back to you at some point about not being funded by Medicaid, because that is federal and somewhat soft money. The same with the audiologist. There's just that need that we have to get that done. And so, again, the 4/10 for the audiologist, the categorical aid, which will be new funding based on the new position, and then the Medicaid funds being set to offset those. So the net impact of those additions are offset by either a different funding source that we have found, or something we cut in order to make that happen. So you'll see that we're 159, and we're rounding. I think there's a dollar difference in my rounding. So then the next thing we're looking at were things that were added mid-year that if we're going to continue, they need to be off the top. Otherwise, they need to stop happening. And so we have the PE specials. There's a 4/10. There's a nurse facilitator that was actually a cut for coming into this year, and mid-year it had to be added back just due to the need of the position. The communication specialist that was hired mid-year, we need to budget for that going forward. We had to add a contracted service for a registered nurse this year just due to the needs of the students, and thus, if we don't add that nurse in as a permanent and ongoing, the contract that we started mid-year with no budget will continue also. So if we're going to continue those nursing services, meet the IEPs, meet the needs of our students in the student services area, we're going to need to just add that in as an off the top. And then those tech teams were brought back mid-year for the stipend, and so if we're going to continue those tech teams and pay the teachers to be sponsors for those tech teams, that is that add. So that brings us up to that mark. And then looking at the different staff restructuring, we have actually go from the 347, it accumulates down to the 302. And these are just different staff restructurings that have occurred. And again, the net effect actually brings the cumulative down a little bit. Anything in orange are things that were kind of lower on your list, and when you had ELT go, asked us to kind of rediscuss where some of those needs fell, they've been moved up kind of thing. So those are things that are different than maybe what you had looked at before. But you'll see that the net impact of the restructuring actually brings us from a cumulative here down to 302. So basically off the top, our items are the 302, 843 against that 4.2 that was the new funding that we've seen so far. Does that kind of all make sense? Most of this is things you've seen, we've talked about. The things in orange are things that maybe have been adjusted into a slightly different place than maybe was in the earlier list, but otherwise it's going to look really the same as what you've seen in previous meetings. Any questions about the things that are on here so far? So the next part really is what kind of comes next. Those are off the top. What are the things that are still pending? And we have the 4.2 minus the 302 to work with. So the first thing that typically is what the board kind of looks at has been the deficit spending, benefits, or salaries. And so April 9th, the board tentatively looking at having our 2.8 million of deficit spending that we target trying to address at least half of it this year. So that's something that's tentatively built in the plan. We know the cost to maintain fringe benefits for all employee groups, and so that is included in the worksheet. And negotiations are pending, so those amounts are blank. So when you do that, you can see that you've gone now from 302, the deficit spending, and then fringe benefits, 2.8 of that 4.2 would be committed with those things, and anything that is filled in for staffing would then continue to raise that number. Does that make sense? So that's kind of your starting point with your worksheet, and so that is a big factor in what you can or can't do beyond what our new revenues are. So the next thing are there other additional considerations that can happen getting past this point? And the list was rather long, and we've kind of tried to bring it down to what are those key things that, depending upon what the courts might decide, depending upon where other things fall, what might happen. They are not in a hard priority order. They're sort of what I would say maybe soft. They're somewhat structured in an order that would make sense to do something before something else, but they're not hardcore in that the board or somebody may choose to pull one out in some fashion. So when you look at this list, there are the additional considerations. Again, the orange are some things that have kind of been moved, but this is where we are. And so the custodians, based on square footage, based on some increased use in areas, those are something that in all likelihood, if we don't do something with custodial FTE, will end up during next year as a contracted service and overtime expense, something that'll incur a deficit spending. So it's kind of there at the top. Special education teachers, we had talked about originally, the request was 9. We thought phase 1, let's look at 3. We've adjusted the categorical aid to the little bit higher amount. These are things based on student needs, based on IEPs, based on the rubric special education applies to the different schools, are things that they have not hired teachers in a while, and it's important for them to try to address that. So it's ranked fairly high in that category. The reinstating contingency with the elementary, these were the 3 elementary that we used for the guidance. By bringing them back in, while you talk about or work through the strategic plan and decide maybe where class size looks as a whole for our district, would help hit hotspots. Again, until enrollment hits schools, we don't always know where those hotspots will fall. Might not need them. We might need them, but that's why they're up there fairly high, is that direct instruction, class size is important, and so those needs. The next one is the interventionists, and that's listed there, and those are those middle school student support kind of positions. And you'll kind of notice the first ones are really more kind of teacher-oriented kind of things. There's an adjustment to the cost with the ALICE training and the safety consultant. If you remember, the ALICE was originally $50. And then there was the consultant on top. After doing some discussion and really looking at where we can start and then where strategic planning and things like that might take us next year, those numbers were adjusted between the two. It's 50. And then looking at what our needs end up panning out to be, how that plan evolves, we can then look at deciding how to best go forward with something under our belt, but maybe starting here. And so that was adjusted slightly there. Then you'll see your student facilitator and your equity facilitator, speech language, parents as teachers, and some of those others falling, kind of further down. The 2 at the bottom are down there as they're important, looking at where our funds are and where we might get to this year. Maybe that's not as important as some of the other things on the list, so they're there, but that's where they fall. You'll see that on the locksmith, for example, we talked about waiting to hire, trying to continue to internally support that existing locksmith. I think Tony said he kind of took a person off and had him, partner with the locksmith for a while to try to get caught up on some things. They might have to try to do that more often in a year so that those things can stay caught up, and then maybe reevaluate that as part of the strategic plan for safety and security, and that position might then come back again next year as part of that strategic plan and a budget consideration for 1920. So that's kind of that's the end of the list. So a lot of things were kind of, just talking about this year. This is kind of where things fell. The ones in orange were things that might have been further down that were just kind of discussed, or things that were kind of touched with our last discussion. You can see that the number is cumulative, takes you down to about the 3.7. It has nothing in there for wages and benefits. So anything it does benefits, but this has nothing for wages. So as you think about that part of it and how it pulls together, obviously that number on the right changes. And so that's kind of where we are. I don't know what questions you have. If you have anything on here you want to visit further about, staff to talk more on, have thoughts. But the idea would be this is sort of a rough, once we know official numbers, we can kind of pan out the rest of it and see where things fall and adjust from there. And it'll be closer to June when we can obviously probably do that. So I don't know if Anna has any comments or you all have any comments, questions. We can just kind of open it up at this point. That's really kind of where we are in a review and bringing back something a little more tight, I guess, for you.
So the only comment that I have, and then if you have questions or comments, is that if you look at any of the things that involve hiring, if there's no decision made until like June, obviously once negotiations are settled, those will be things that, depending on what it is or how we advertise, that may not get filled. So for example, the special education teachers, it would be hard for them to start that process in July to try to hire 3 teachers if that is approved. Same with the interventionists. I'm not saying, what to decide on, but some of them will just be difficult to fill if we wait until negotiations are settled to determine that. But I really understand the importance of doing that as well, because we don't know where we will settle at. So that it's just a challenging spot to be in.
Can I ask so
Kelly.
is it safe to say that we will have at least this much money? I mean,
based on the information I have, as of now.
So are other districts moving forward with hiring for positions?
It's totally up to where they are. Some districts may not have the deficit spending incurred, and so they may be more comfortable being able to move forward. Some are waiting. Other districts are waiting. I think every district is
a little different,
and I think it's really what's best for us and how we want to make that decision. But I think hiring in general, it's hard the longer you wait, and that's just the nature of the beast.
And the other factor may be these are all new positions, so other districts may be moving forward, but they may not be considering as many new positions that we are. So with our other hiring, we're moving forward, we're hiring because that's what we're going about business, but these are all new positions, so we wouldn't be able to move forward with that. So yes and no, like Kathy said, some districts are totally moving forward, but they may not be thinking about adding as many new positions that we are.
And would you recommend that we move forward with some of these hiring based on both on the hiring considerations from an HR perspective, but also from a budgeting perspective?
For me, that's hard to say, because coming from the budget, whatever you commit to means you don't have it later when you decide to settle or do something different. So that's the balance, and that's your decision to where you most comfortable feel on that, because whatever you decide early, and obviously there's a need to do that, it impacts your decision making later, and it's a balance. And so for hiring, the sooner you can hire, obviously the better for budget, because the decision is so late and hard to predict. They're counterproductive to each. I mean, they don't jive. So one would say yes, and on the other hand, it would be no. So I think it's one of those things is where is that comfort level and that you feel is the best place for you to land.
And there are a couple of things, like, although the custodians at the top, you have time, like you don't have to decide that today because that's a classified position we hire year round. But once everything is settled, whatever, you may say go for it, then hire the custodian. So that's something, the custodian, and I'm not trying to not prioritize safety, but those are things that are after July 1, we will still be ahead of the game. Tony, am I misspeaking?
No, just with the plan, putting the plan together.
Yeah, so we can put a plan together and be ready to roll around, but you don't have to, because you are in a challenging position, because everything you approved is saying this is, we're committing the dollars, yeah.
So I have a question. based on some conversations I had recently with some teachers about what their needs are. The special ed teachers, how would moving forward with hiring those positions now impact a general classroom teacher? Does it impact them at all? I mean, I don't think I really understand where those positions fit into the buildings.
The special education teachers, they support the general education with the students. And it just depends. If we don't have a special ed teacher to support students, they may pull up the classroom more, may not be able to be supported. It really depends on what the needs are.
So with the new, like where do we need these new positions? Because right now, I'm just thinking about my own kid's school, and so there's a special ed teacher for K2, there's a special ed teacher for 3-5.
And
like, are we talking about for specific needs, or are these like general support positions?
it's based on the needs of the students. So, for example, we're looking at elementary. Our elementary numbers have increased, and we have an increased teacher. So our caseloads are probably a little over.
Okay.
And
so we might have a building where we need to have 3 special ed teachers instead of 2. Is the
so you might, and then depend on and so it's not like a first grade. It depends on where the students are distributed in the class. So a teacher may cover first, second 1 year, but next year maybe one first, second, third. It just depends on the.
Do we have buildings where we only have 1 special ed teacher?
We've committed that every building will at least have 2 special ed teachers.
And that's true elementary, middle, and high?
Elementary especially, our middle school and high schools have numerous teachers, maybe 10 special ed teachers at high schools.
At each building, all right. I just, that we haven't talked about how many of those positions there are at that level in a long time, so. Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
So I'm going to ask a simplistic question, but because I'm getting the sense that you would like us to make a decision about hiring some of these difficult to hire positions. I mean, you say custodians, not a big deal, but if we wait too long on some of these others, but that does commit us. I don't have my calculator out. Could you give me, in terms of those positions, could you give me kind of a ballpark amount that we're talking about? Because I feel much more comfortable potentially committing something if I knew what that amount was.
I actually have a related question to that. Do you mind if I add to that?
Sure.
I'm actually looking at the edit to the interventionists, and I'm curious about that particular line item, the shift. I know initially we had 4 FTEs, and the increase was 137.5, and now we have 2. And am I reading that right? The increase is 122.298. Why? What don't I understand there?
The middle schools, and Anna can help me here because she had the conversation with the principals, but my understanding is when they did the initial budget request, they just wanted to get a position, went with a classified position that is less money, but in the end, based on the needs that they really have, it makes more sense for those to be certified positions. But for this, it would be double the cost. So if they started out with 2, kind of tried to phase that in, and then you would likely see a second request a year from now for another 2 that would give each building full time. This just gets them started with the support that they need, and then moving forward. And I know Anna had further conversation with
we met with the middle school principals a couple of times, and they would like it to be a certified position, not necessarily saying you have to be a certified teacher, but there are other degrees around behavior analysis and things. So they would post it in an either-or fashion, and then these people would be 2 full-time people that may be split between like Central and Southwest, and Monday, Thursday at Central, Tuesday, Friday at Southwest, and Wednesday a day to like touch base with district personnel or whomever. So, or if they absolutely needed to be in the building, we would work around that. But that's kind of where they wanted to start. And then next year it would come, if you were approved it this year, they would come back and ask for 2 more. So each building would end up having a full-time person.
Okay.
They did spend some time talking about the interventionist versus if you look down to the middle school's facts, health, FTE. And they were kind of split 3-1 on the interventionist over the facts, but they said if it was decided late, they would want that because that would allow those classes to be semester long and address some of the individual plans of study and and free up the librarian because they're teaching a part of a course. They're teaching a course that's 1 or 2 hours a day. Maybe Jennifer's not out there. But that wouldn't require them necessarily hiring another person. It would be like shifting some FTE and maybe a small. So they prioritize. They would prefer the interventionist, but say after everything's settled and you're saying, say there's money, that's why that's on there, because that also would directly impact kids and services that they're receiving.
Okay, and 2 questions about the interventionists. The last meeting, there was this conversation that they were going to spend half their time teaching some particular class and half their time being. Has that been? Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they, after many conversations, it was decided that they would be more effective. Like if I know you're here Monday, Thursday, the whole day, we can plan around the student groups, those kind of things, versus the half and half, because that seemed where it can get a little blurry and you wouldn't have the flexibility for that Wednesday to determine what's needed or meetings and that kind of thing.
And the expectation that the interventionist would be someone who had, just to be clear again, is someone that has specialty in understanding behavior, that the issue, this person would be primarily addressing behavioral needs and social emotional needs of students. Correct.
So we didn't really flush that out completely, but we didn't want to necessarily say you had to have a teaching degree, because there are degrees out there when we looked at it where people have like behavior analysis, like some of those to widely expand it or not eliminate. So we didn't talk through all of that, but that was given some thought around that in case there were people out there that specialize in those kind of things. And I don't know enough about it to know the specific degrees that we would, but that's something we would flush out.
So that makes it actually, I think, harder for me to make a decision about an interventionist, and we don't really know the kind of person we're looking for, the skills that we're looking for. Am I missing that?
No, I think we know the skills. I just don't know the specific area of the different degree options that are available around behavior specialists and those kind of things. Because there are people who have those degrees who don't necessarily have a teaching degree, if that makes sense.
Most of them would not be a teaching degree. Like many of them would not be a teaching degree. But most of the teachers I spoke to told me that they would not have expertise in behavior, that some of them with special education degree would have expertise in behavior, and that we have other people that might have a psych degree or another degree that have some expertise in behavior, but you would still, the essence of the position in terms of what they would be doing at the building is unchanged by fleshing out what the requirement would be in terms of degree that the person held, or the expertise that the person held would still need to be behavior related, correct? Yes.
Correct. I'm looking at Kevin. Correct. Because now some teachers don't, but if they have a special ed or they came to us from a different background and they had that background before, they now may also have a teaching degree. And so that was, that's layered in there too.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, because I think this is relevant. So when we talk about a degree, are we talking about an undergraduate degree, a master's degree? Because that's a very different level of expertise.
But typically, I think it depends to answer the question about what the needs are and addressing those type of needs. But I think that is the goal, looking at our CI3T and that tier 1 and 2 as far as behavioral and social and emotional needs of students. They would probably also support some academic needs. It just depends on what that is. But when we look at degrees and certifications, probably someone either with the counseling, social work, psychologist, we have that's certified, it's KSDE certified.
So would this person fall underneath the, I'm still learning, but it would still fall underneath your umbrella, correct?
I believe so. They would
That would
work,
be house?
so I think the discussion, I don't have the answer to that, but the discussion is so for example, if there's a CI3T facilitator that's under student services, they would work directly
Okay.
with student services. We tend to, mostly when people are working directly in the buildings, the principals typically supervise and evaluate.
Okay.
Right.
With the contingency teaching positions, because they're contingency, we wouldn't necessarily be hiring somebody for that. Right now, that's just a placeholder in the budget to hire if we have a need.
Right, those
And
are to
school
address
starts, right?
hotspots.
Right.
And, you know, we tentatively, if you remember, even last year, we tentatively had some targeted contingency, and then as the enrollment hit the schools and it kind of shifted, we ended up not necessarily needing some of those contingency. But it does allow us to kind of have that plan of action if we really see those hotspots. And
But that's not one that we have to commit somebody, put somebody under contract right now.
No.
I think, in talking
And
to Anna,
Sammy or Dave can tell you like the number of hotspots we currently are watching and how much contingency we've actually used. But no, that is one that you could wait, because we won't really know hotspots until probably like
August, right?
July, August, like as the enrollment starts to settle. So no, that's not one that to reinstate it, we would be okay.
So I guess just for clarity and kind of back to what Rick originally had asked is if we could go through this list and really pull out the ones you want us to try and take action on tonight versus those that can be delayed, and get that dollar amount very clearly articulated.
So if you were asking me, I think the special education teachers, one, because you're just always competing for that. And that dollar amount is the 90
it's the net of the 183.
minus the 90.
697, so it's basically 50.
Is that right? It's 50? Okay.
Pretty close, yeah.
So it's 50 because the 93 is set off by something else.
No, it's 90-some,
It's 90 something. Yeah, I was like,
93, right?
okay. So the special education, I would say the interventionist, because although we don't really know, we don't want to lose good candidates. I mean, as we broaden it, we don't want to lose good potential candidates that may be under contract in another district or something that does similar work. And then the hard one, the student facilitator or the equity facilitator, but I think it's hard to commit to all of those because then you made decisions. But those are all the ones that impact.
Those three line items.
Yeah, the interventionist, the special ed, and the student service and equity all impact, that's hiring.
Those four.
So that's
Yeah.
four positions.
So what's the grand total there?
I got like about 338.
About 345,000.
What was it?
345,000.
Kathy, you can tell us exactly, right?
She's gonna put it in.
So the special ed is that, and then you said, which one's the interventionist? Ones?
If you're gonna do the facilitator, both facilitators, if you're gonna do those are all, I'm not saying that's what you need to do, those are the ones that,
Time.
yes.
The teaching positions would be the 211,995. That would be your special education and your interventionist. Those two is 211,995. And then
The facilitators,
those positions equal 128. So the total would be about 348,69.
Oh, is it 2?
Is that right?
And that's from the remaining 2.8 technically, right?
That would take you, if you go back. These were off the top, so it'd be 302, and it would add the 340 to that, so that makes you at 642, somewhere around there, 645, just to round it. And then
The 1.4 for contingency.
I'm into deficit spending, and if you didn't do benefits, but, so if you add the 340 to here, you're right at a couple million. Add another 3.1 somewhere in there, 3.2. If you did all of them, if you just did the teaching, then that's 11. If you could do them as separate motions, you know, or you could, and then vote on them that way, or.
Well, just to remind the board, we're not actually going to vote on anything right now.
Right.
There's a placeholder on the agenda. This is just,
Thank you.
you get to think about this until we get to that first item on the regular business. And then if we are going to make a decision, that will be the time to make a motion about it.
And you could do that one at a time or as a block, or however you choose to do it, if you want
Right.
to vote on them individually or together. We won't know anything till the courts till June, so it's a wait and see game in that, and we don't know if it'll be the same. I think we're kind of guaranteed this minimum amount, just like last year. I think they decided it wasn't adequate, but that's what they're going to approve and go back and do more. Courts may do the same thing. They may say, go back and find more money. They may shut us down because they didn't, you know, there's a lot of things that they could do, but I anticipate that at a minimum, what's passed at least will be like last year, will be the starting point for that. But
I've heard discussion about whether if they think that the court's not satisfied with the amount, if the state can't prove that it's adequate, that they didn't do their homework, that there's a couple things they could either decide to call them back for a special session this summer, or they may say, well, you've at least made an attempt and we will let you re-engage in this next session. And if that were to happen, even if the court said, yeah, we don't think that you've proven adequacy, but we're going to give you till next session, that would mean this is where we are. We wouldn't get it, even if the court ruled against the state, we wouldn't necessarily get any new money in that scenario until 2019-20.
if they send them back to special sessions, they come back with a more of an amount, then there's the potential we would have something, but it could be September before we
right, and there would likely need to be another round of briefing and argument before the court after whatever special session occurred, so it puts you off even later in the school year.
It would be a mid-year change, so for hiring and things like that, it wouldn't be something you would know till later.
And
would start the year knowing what we know today.
And I was just informed that we currently do not have enough contingency at elementary to cover the potential hotspots. We have 2.375 contingency available and 7 potential hotspots, but it's not like we can do anything until so if all of those places ended up at those numbers, we would potentially be in trouble. That has not been the trend. We start out always with way more hotspots, and it ends up balancing out, but that's just kind of where we are right now.
Okay. All right, any additional questions for Kathy? Nope. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I'm going to call a break until our regular meeting is slated to start at 6:15. So we've got about 14 minutes. Grab something else to eat if you didn't get what you wanted yet. Thank you. All right.
Oh, yeah, no, it's amazing.
Evening. I'd like to call to order the May 14th, 2018 regular meeting of the Board of Education. Our first item of business is to approve our agenda.
Move we approve?
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, we're going to move into an executive session on negotiations. I move the Board of Education recess to executive session to protect the public interest in negotiating a fair and equitable contract to discuss negotiations pursuant to the exception for employer-employee negotiations under COMA with Anna Stubblefield, Jerry Kimball, David Cunningham, Kathy Johnson, Sam Devon, and Matt Brungart invited to be present, and with the board to return to open session in this room at
30 minutes, Dave?
6:48 with possible action to follow.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Okay, we've returned from our executive session. We have no action to take at this time, so we will move on to our special recognitions. Welcome, everyone, this evening. Okay, we will start with Free State High School Student Honors. Janice Fullerton, Free State High School Gifted Enrichment Resource Teacher, will help us with our presentation.
If a teacher was allowed to have favorites, the two students I bring with me tonight would be on the top of my list. They're amazing, and I know that with people like this in charge of the future, we have nothing to worry about. The first student I'd like to present to you is Sandia Ravikamor. She's a senior at Free State High School, and she never ceases to impress me. She's been selected as a delegate for both the National Youth Science Camp and U.S. Senate Youth Program. She was the only female delegate to be chosen from Kansas in 7 years for the U.S. Senate Youth Group. Both of these are extremely selective programs. She is only one of the 2 delegates per state in each of these, and the opportunity to attend is a great honor. Sandia. The next student from Free State is Elliot Wisnot. He's a sophomore at Free State. He's a student who has challenged me to be a better teacher. Elliot's latest adventure is contacting House Representative Tom Sloan, asking to change the Kansas law pertaining to organ donation. Representative Sloan recognized Elliot's persuasive abilities and drafted HB 2472. Elliot presented and testified before members of the Kansas House and Senate during this year's session. His bill was approved unanimously in both chambers before being signed by the governor. Elliot will speak briefly about his bill. Elliot.
I first read a book called Nudge by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, and in that book there was a section about organ donation, and about how if we change the law just a little bit, we can increase donation quite a bit and save a lot of lives in the process. And so there are 4 main systems that are used throughout the world. There's the one that's mainly used in Kansas, and that's what we could call encouraged volunteerism. And that's where if you want to become an organ donor, then you can, and you go and sign up, and then that's it. And there's one that's mainly used in Europe, which is presumed consent, and that's where once you turn 18, you're automatically registered, and you have to opt out of that system. There's also one called routine removal, which is your organs get removed no matter what. And there's also one called mandated choice, which is where you seek to pose the question, do you want to be an organ donor as many times as possible in order to give people the most freedom and opportunity to make their decision. And so that final one, mandated choice, is the one that we sought to pursue in changing Kansas law. And so what we did is a number of changes. The first change is that every time you go to renew a driver's license, or every time it expires, or every time you get a driver's license, you get asked the question, do you want to be an organ donor? And now, also, there was a requirement that you had to sign a form in the presence of 2 witnesses. You don't have to do that anymore, so that's one thing that people don't have to do to make it easier. Also, there were some changes to, in the event that someone is deceased, who can make the anatomical gift on behalf of them. Now it's changed from a unanimous decision among a certain group of people, such as adult siblings, to just a majority now. So that makes it easier. And also, if a doctor or hospital were to facilitate a transplant, previously, if someone did not want that transplant to occur, they could threaten to sue the hospital or the doctor, and now they cannot do so because doctors and hospitals are now exempt from liability if they do a transplant in good faith. And all those 4 things were met with almost unanimous agreement and approval from all members of the House and the Senate, and they were just so happy to support change in such a positive manner in Kansas.
Okay, and with some honors for South Middle School students, we have Keith Jones, our South Middle School principal, and Lori Byers, our gifted education facilitator.
Mind just coming right here and facing your parents so they can do
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Okay, we're gonna try the good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We have some Cougars in the house tonight. This is the first of many recognitions tonight of our students here at the next Billy Mills Middle Day winners. And so I'm going to turn it over to Miss Byers, who does a phenomenal job with our students and challenging them and giving them new opportunities. And they really, really represented well this past month for South Middle School.
So thanks for having us tonight. 3 of our students on the far side, Francis Parker, Perrin Golter, and Thomas Lushington, all participated in Model UN this year. They were assigned a country to research and then represent as a delegate in the Model UN. And both of theirs, they were able to successfully argue for passage. And then Frances was also selected for Best Authorship Speech in her council. And then Thomas was outstanding delegate in his council, and he was also second place for Best Middle School Delegate in the whole conference. So they did fantastically. And our other 2 students here, June Baggett and Gabriel Spray, worked with Miranda. The theme was conflict and compromise, and so they put together a performance, and they won at the local level and were able to compete very dramatic performance. So congratulations to them.
Miss Boyle. Now, I told you this is the first of 3 times you're going to see some Cougars. So we have another Cougar in the house, Miss Georgia Blackwood and her family. Will you guys come up? Mr. Cadu and Miss Cadu, could you guys come up with your daughter? I'm going to have Georgia turn around and kind of share that. Miss Cadu, could you come? Because I want you to explain, kind of excited about the honor that she received from our state government. So I'm going to let her explain kind of the award and what took place.
Okay, let's see. Well, let's see. I was approached by Ponkawee Victors in February, and she needed help with the passage of Kansas House Bill 2498, and that bill restricts schools from prohibiting schools or government municipalities from restricting natives from wearing their regalia or their feathers for formal functions such as graduations. And Kansas passed, the Governor Collier signed that into law on March 26th. And Georgia was present there for the signing. But Georgia, I was so impressed with Georgia. I'm proud of her. I'm just so proud of her. But she testified before the House and the Senate, and she was strong. I think she'll be a really great leader. And I would like to say that, Georgia, do you want to tell me what you learned about the Kansas bills, the 10%? Well, it's only 10% of bills introduced get passed, and this passed unanimously in the House and the Senate. It was such a breeze. But when we got this framed, we took this out to Haskell. We took it to Dorothy Stites, who's the admissions counselor out there, because in 1996 she had to fight with KU to get the right to wear her regalia. So I thought it was appropriate that she would be the first one to see this, because she said when she was going through this similar issue, people on the Hill turned their backs on her, going and thriving. And I'm just Georgia gives me hope, because she's the next generation.
I'll just have to add, that's one of the best things about South Middle School is our diversity at our school, and our students that are learning to be empowered to have a voice in the community and really advocate for things of change. And so we're really excited about Georgia and what she's done, and all the Cougars that are doing great things. So thank you again for having our students tonight.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next set of honorees, Team STEAM Robotics Honors with Johnny Paradise from our Free State High School information technology teacher.
It's a lot.
Good evening. Obviously, I'm not Johnny Paradise. My name is Jeannie Merritt. I'm the other Team STEAM robotics coach. I actually teach at Lawrence High School, and Mr. Paradise is my cohort over at Free State High School. We wanted to recognize our team this year. We are the USD 497's district's first robotics competition team. And we had a phenomenal year this year and competed at the Heartland Regionals in March. And our team managed to come in 7th, I think, out of 45 teams or 36 teams? 43 teams. I knew I was going to get the number wrong. And we got invited to be a part of the number 5 alliance, which meant that the teams up above us invited us to come join their team and come compete with them. And throughout this whole process, the team actually took home the Innovation and Control Award, which is an award for our computer programmers, because there's a time in the competition where our robots function independently without the drivers. And our code team had such a outstanding code that we got recognized out of all the teams that were in the area. So we're extremely proud of them. And I'm actually gonna turn you over to Rhiann Walton, Free State sophomore. She is our Chief Executive Officer, and she'll tell you more about the team.
All right, as she said, I'm Rhiann Walton. I'm 15 years old. I'm a sophomore at Free State this year, and I'm the CEO of Team STEAM Robotics. So we have members from all 3 district high schools, so Lawrence High School, Free State, and Lawrence Virtual School. And our drive team of 5 members has people from 4 different schools that are in the Lawrence area. We're working on our gender diversity because that's very important when we're talking about science, technology, engineering, and math. So this year, almost 20% of our members are female, a number that has gone up in recent years. We also have a lot of female leadership, including myself, several managers, and 2 members of our 5-person drive team. Our team as a whole has also doubled in the overall size over the past 2 years. All right, so we're Team STEAM, which stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, or Art and Math. So we have people whose interests vary from art to science, and we all work together to create one product, which is a robot at the end of the year for our competition. But we don't just build robots, we also have a big effect on the community. This year, we hosted 2 competitions. We hosted the Kansas Cup, which is for other teams of our size, and we also hosted a first LEGO League competition, which is for 4th through 8th graders who are interested in science and technology. We also attend the Confabularium every year, and we've hosted summer camps, and we're hosting them again this year for 6th through 8th graders. All right, thank you. As a first tradition, we'd love to give you all high fives instead of handshakes, because that's what we do. Right. Oh yes, also we have a collage including some photos that we took at this year's competition that we would like to give to you guys. Cool.
Thank you very much.
Well done. Good job. Good job. Here we go. Good job, guys. Good job. Well done. Well done. Good job. Congratulations. Congratulations. Nice job. Good job, you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Yes.
Oh. That's really nice. Thank you very much to the team for the collage. We really appreciate that. Okay, our next recognition, Fair Housing Poster Contest winners with representatives of the City of Lawrence Human Relations Commission. And Danica Moore.
Yes, I have Danica Moore with me. I'm Scott Wagner. I'm with the City Attorney's Office for the City of Lawrence, and Danica and USD 497, along with a couple other community partners, again partnered with the Lawrence Human Relations Commission to sponsor our Fair Housing Month poster competition. I think this is our 4th year, maybe, Danica? Yeah, we had over 50 entries, and a couple Lawrence City Commission meeting, and we have them here tonight for those that could attend, and they received their prizes then. April is always recognizing this country as Fair Housing Month, and this year we recognize the 50th anniversary of the passage of the federal Fair Housing Act, so that was kind of our theme this year. And Danica is going to call up the names of the kiddos that could attend tonight. So on behalf of the city and the Human Relations Commission, I wanted to thank the school district for partnering with us once again, because this is a great opportunity for teachers and families to talk about fair housing, talk about diversity, talk about inclusion, and all those issues that are important for our community. So thank you.
And so we'd like to thank Scott as well for his partnership as well. So I'm going to read the high school students. They are not here tonight. High schoolers have jobs and also working with younger siblings. So first place for this year went to Ella Blake. She's an 11th grader at Bishop Seabury. Second place went to Satori Good. She's a senior at Lawrence High School. Third place, we had a tie for third place to Simone Knox, who's an 11th grader at Lawrence High School, and Abby Brown, also an 11th grader at Lawrence High School. For our middle school category, third place goes to Bella Landis. She's a 7th grader at Billy Mills South Middle School. And so as the students come up, you'll see that they also have their artwork with them that they will hold up for you to see. Second place for middle school goes to Abby Kuhn. She's a 6th grader at Southwest. I don't believe Abby's here with us tonight. And first place went to Estella Grove. She is an 8th grader at West Middle School. And for our elementary students, third place goes to Ariana Waller. She is a 4th grader at Sunset Hill Elementary. Second place goes to Lily Olson. She is a 4th grader at Sunflower Elementary. And our first place recipient goes to Jemiah Hicks, who is a 4th grader at Sunset Hill Elementary. Thank you.
Awesome. What a great picture. That's what a good picture. That's awesome. I love it. Hi. Hi. Good to see you again. Congratulations. Nice. That's very cool. Congratulations.
Congratulations. It's awesome.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Congratulations again to all of our honorees this evening. It's always so much fun to see the wonderful and hear about the wonderful things that our students are doing. And thank you to all the staff and parents who support those activities. Okay, our next item on the agenda, the report of the board, the president of the board. I have a couple of recognitions of my own to do this evening. I am going to recognize two of our board members, G.R. Gordon-Ross and Kelly Jones, who have received certificates of achievement for participation in the 2018 Introductions to Foundations of Boardsmanship training from the Kansas Association of School Boards, and to tell you how much we appreciate that you take the extra time, that you took the extra time to do that, because it is a lengthy training and it's very valuable. So thank you very much.
I'm not going to get down and walk. Nice try.
Does that come with a pay raise for them now?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. As far as the president's report, I'll just want to share a few things that have gone on since our last board meeting in April. First thing, we have, just to remind board members, we have set a date for our board retreat, June 26th. Jessica and I will be working with Dr. Lewis on an agenda for that, and we are working with staff to identify a location. We're trying to do it someplace in Lawrence, but off-site, so we can have a little bit of a different atmosphere to have just stimulate our conversation and training. So we will be sharing those details hopefully soon. Lots of activities going on this time of year. So I had the good fortune to attend Showtime at Lawrence High on April 26th. It was amazing. Really enjoyed the show. And on April 27th, there were a couple things going on that day. Reasons to Believe reception at South Middle School. They honored 3 former staff members, and they're also representatives of their LEAP partners. It was a really nice event, brought back some Dr. Blackbird and Mr. Garvin.
And Lynn Herod.
And Lynn Herod to be recognized as the first members of their Reasons to Believe honorees, and that was a great event. And then the Foundation Follies were that night as well, and that was a lot of fun. And I will just say that the ESDC skit was amazing. Good job, Julie. It was so funny. April 30th, board officers and the superintendent met with the community group who has been working on the issues around changing the name at South Middle School to Billy Mills Middle School, and we are moving forward with plans to do a recognition of Mr. Mills. Staff is working with some community groups to kind of bring all that together, and we've got a plan in place to incorporate that recognition into the facilities work that's going to be going on at the middle school this summer. May 1st, in that same vein, May 1st, the facilities committee met. A large focus of that meeting was actually on the Free State High School project. That's the GMP for that is on our agenda this evening, the finalized plans and where we're going with that. It's very exciting to see how that's come together. We are meeting all of our programmatic goals from the bond campaign, but we are also able to do some things I think that they didn't expect to be able to do at the building within the budget, and so that's been really great. Another nice feature of that, as you saw in the board enclosures, we've had a very high participation by contractors within a 60-mile radius of Lawrence, so really keeping lots of those tax dollars in and around our community. That's been really wonderful. It's a testament to the great work that our architects and our construction managers have been doing to build relationships within the construction community in the work that they've done for our district. I was able to attend a staff mixer at the Jayhawk Club on May 2nd. That was a really nice event to honor our staff and kind of help them celebrate the end of the school year. May 7th, Dr. Stubblefield and I both attended the Lawrence Chamber Lunch where Governor Collier came to speak. He touched on a lot of issues, one of which was the school finance ongoing litigation, and he talked a lot about his vision going forward, kind of getting into campaign mode, but it was interesting to attend that. Policy committee met on May 9th to review the feedback for the fundraising policy, and we will be talking about that at length later this evening. May 10th, I was able to attend the Bob's Award presentation at Sunset Hill for Michelle Duncan, which was actually my first Bob's Award ceremony, surprise ceremony. This is the first time I've been able to attend it, and it was so much fun to see someone receive that award. Just to remind the community, it's a $10,000 award to a teacher from a group of anonymous donors, all of whom share the first name of Bob and have been doing this for 30, how long? They've been doing it for a very long, 21 years. These donors donate this money they've been doing it every year for 21 years for us to honor an outstanding educator, and it's really amazing that we are able to do that. And finally, I just wanted to say that I have a child who participates in the band program at one of our middle schools, and we had the band concert last week, the final band concert for the year, and I'm just always so impressed by the arts education that our education professionals provide in our buildings, and it was just so much fun. So with that, I wanted to share, because Melissa Johnson had to leave early, she had just a short thing she wanted me to share on her behalf. She said that she had the opportunity to attend LHS's Showtime performance at the end of April, and also the Liberty Memorial Central Middle School Applause performance this past week. And she says, "I continue to be amazed by the never-ending talent of our students and staff. Tonight I will have the opportunity to see the LHS Pop Show which is geared to display the talents of freshmen and sophomores at Lawrence High," and she says, "Great work to everyone involved." And that's all I have for this evening, so I'll turn it over to Dr. Stubblefield.
Okay.
Good evening. I have a few announcements as well. Quickly, I'll try to go through them. First, I want to say we are in the process of working to assemble a high school start time advisory council this month. We will send out an application this week for parents interested in being on the advisory council. And we're also going to work with LEA, principals, Boys and Girls Club, the Chamber, and each of our existing advisory groups to select representatives to be a part of the council. We're asking the board to appoint 2 board members to serve. The council will meet monthly or more as needed from June to December in order to bring a recommendation to the board in December or January. And we're working with the Center for Community Health Development to organize this council and to get feedback from our community around the high school start time proposal. Congratulations to Lawrence High Assistant Principal and Athletic Director Bill DeWitt, who has been selected as Principal of the Adult Education Service and Alternative Programming. He will assume that position beginning July 1st, and we have started a search to replace Bill. Congratulations also to Michelle Duncan again, Sunset Hill second grade teacher and the recipient of this year's Lawrence Schools Foundation Special Award for Teaching Excellence, and also called the Bob's Award. Our high school seniors will wrap up their school year this week. Finals are on Wednesday and Thursday. Graduation season is upon us. We're very proud of all of our graduates and are excited to see them preparing to go on to post-secondary education and careers and to make their mark on the world. Project Search will celebrate its graduates at 10 o'clock this Thursday morning here at the district office. The Community Transition Program will honor its graduates on Friday at 10 a.m., again here in the boardroom. Lawrence Virtual School will host its commencement at 1 o'clock Saturday afternoon in the Free State High School auditorium. And then next week, Free State High's graduation is next Tuesday at 7 o'clock p.m. at Free State Football Stadium. Lawrence High's graduation is also next week on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Lawrence High Football Stadium. Our final graduation is the Adult Education Center celebration on June 7th at 7 o'clock p.m. In the Lawrence High School auditorium. The board and the public are welcome to attend these ceremonies to celebrate our graduates. Following graduations, turf replacement will begin at both high schools. Free State High School football field and track will be closed to the general public this summer. Lawrence High School's football field and track will be open to the public until June 30th, but will be closed for the remainder of the summer. We invite patrons to use our middle school athletic fields for exercise this summer. I would also like to publicly acknowledge all of our retiring teachers and staff for their years of commitment and dedication to our schools. Our schools will recognize more than 50 retirees this month. We thank all of them for their support of our student achievement and success and wish them well during their retirement years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. Okay, next item is patron commentary. Do we have any this evening? Okay, no patron commentary. All right, board commentary. Kelly?
I just wanted to let you all know that I am now serving on the, I think I was nominated because I'm a board member, which I am bringing it to this meeting, on the Live Well Sexual Violence Prevention Ad Hoc Committee. I'm sitting, the purpose of that committee, it's run by the Sexual Trauma and Abuse Care Center, which was formerly Gadugi. And the purpose is to look at what are the contributing factors in the community that result in increases of sexual violence in our community. So there'll be people from Lawrence Memorial are serving, there are folks from the Housing Authority, there are people from United Way. Additionally, I think there are people from the City Commission as well. So anyway, there's a whole host of folks. The police department is present, and Haskell will be there. Anyway, very excited to be part of that group and looking forward to the next 9 months of additional meetings, but excited to be on it just the same. So I'll keep you updated on that. And then I did have a request from the Women of Color in Lawrence. They are working on what are they working, mural, thank you. Someone else had that as well? Who said that?
I just know of it.
Oh, you've been, okay, great. And so they're asking for our support. They'd like to do a mural on the side of the library. They have already gotten letters of support from the Library Board of Trustees and Haskell University Watkins Museum. They'll be going before the city tomorrow to discuss that and would love to have support if you want to. And so I just brought the image, and you can kind of see where the mural would be at, and it'll specifically be about how women of color have contributed to the Lawrence community historically and currently. So I'll pass that around for you all to see, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other board commentary?
Jill? I'd also attended the Follies, and I wanted to just thank the Lawrence Schools Foundation for putting it on. It's just so much work, and the teachers too. The amount of hours and the funds that were raised is really great. And I was super impressed with Anna's performance.
That is another, I should have said that one in my commentary, that is another opportunity that showcases just the amazing range of talents that our staff have, and it's really wonderful that they share those in that.
Very brave and very
yes, every year. So thank you to all of the participants, and thank you to the Schools Foundation for the work that they do. All right. We will move on then to our consent agenda. Consent agenda items are those that are considered routine and are adopted by one motion unless any board member or the superintendent requests that an item be removed. The item or items removed are voted on separately. And we have some retirements to recognize this evening, Jessica.
We do. We would like to recognize Brett Jones, Margaret Jones, Stephen Stimmerman, Paula Meifel, and Mary Rooney for all of your years of service with the Lawrence Public Schools. Thank you.
Okay.
And with that, I move that we adopt the items listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
Jones?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
Beeson?
Yes.
Fincher?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our reports. Our first report tonight is a follow-up on the budget workshop that we had before the meeting started with Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance.
So unless you want me to go through much of what we did earlier, the only thing that I would have to bring for you to do would be is if you had any follow-up to that you'd like me to go through, or any motions that you would want to have take place tonight. Otherwise, really what we did at the study session would be all we would go over again.
So having had an opportunity to kind of sit with that for a little while, all the information that Kathy shared, I think really where we left it was that we have some positions that staff has brought forward as part of that budget plan that might be much easier to fill if we talked about doing that now rather than waiting. And so I will open it up for board discussion to get a sense of whether we're going to take any action or suggestions about what action you would like to see the board take on those suggestions. As Kathy had indicated earlier, I think we can discuss them individually, or we can discuss them as a package, depending on the pleasure of the board, basically.
Well, I can start by just saying I think we're in a tough spot because we don't really know the final numbers, and we still have to consider that some of what is not in here is what we will negotiate for salary, and that process is going to take some time, and so that's also not really listed here as a concern. So anything that we do approve tonight obviously means is not on the table for negotiations, and so that's a reality that we need to keep in mind. as we move forward. And if we delay again, I mean, I guess I would just turn to Dr. Stubblefield and say, you know, kind of, I realize it's going to sort of slow down our pool, you know, and those types of things for some of these positions. Do we have coverage if we can't get some of these positions filled? I guess I'd like to have you talk a little bit about that.
Well, all of these positions are new positions, so as far as coverage is concerned, we would be able to, if the positions don't get approved or if it's delayed and we can't find the right, we would implement a plan B as much as possible. So there is that. We would move forward and continue to make progress. We can look and adapt and adjust as much as we can, and then moving forward, see what positions we can hire for. And just depending on, sometimes you get lucky late and sometimes you don't, but we would just be in a position to, if you approve them later, to advertise and to see what will happen. Or if there are internal candidates, to really analyze the domino effect to determine if we move them down or later, depending on where they're coming from.
So whether we do it now or we do it later kind of assumes that we do it at some point, unless we decide we're not, obviously. I'm still struggling a little bit with, I mean, these are important positions, and yes, we might have a little more budget certainty later on, or maybe we'll have less, who knows. But Anna, if you could give me a sense for just kind of, in your view, how critical these, like the interventionist, for example, I mean, how critical is that position, do you think? Or
Well, and there are others who may want to say something, but I think as far as when we look at the social and emotional needs, and when we look at our data, and the middle school principals, actually, they were the one who asked for this as they looked at data and to try to figure out how to best provide support to the students. So I would say, from my perspective, the special education component, just given the number of needs that we have seen the increase in, the interventionists are critical in the sense that those that, not that the others wouldn't, but those would be direct impact to students immediately, if that makes sense. They will be in buildings with kids, impacting what our students do day to day. Not to say the other positions would not, but that would be their primary role. So that is my perspective on that. All of them are critical. I don't know, and I mean, I think when you look at the special education, because of the offset of the categorical aid, it's 3 positions for 93,000. So even if you said maybe we move on 1 or 2, that reduces it, and that's a different amount than mathematically.
About 30.
It's about 30 for 1. So that's something else that you could, Kevin, am I speaking as a place like 1 is better than none to move forward with, or do you need 3? I know we divided it in 3, but I'm just putting it out there like that.
We're going to put you on the spot. He needs 9. Right.
I know you need 9, but and he said anything. Yeah.
I think it just highlights that, and I'll say that not so much for the benefit of the board, but for the community, what a difficult position we continue to be in, despite the fact that we know we are getting some new money this year because of the depth of underfunding that has occurred in our state for public schools for a long time, right? So, we have this long list of things that we need all of them, and we still can't afford to do that and to give a raise to our teachers, which is absolutely also a priority. So and to stop our deficit spending, which is absolutely also a priority. So how do we accomplish all of those things? And I think the answer to that is that we have to make some choices about which things are going to happen, and it doesn't mean that we don't think that there's anything on that list that's not important or that shouldn't be a priority. It's just that we can't possibly do all of it this year, and that's not the answer that everybody's going to want to hear.
So I may be in the, I'm sorry, go ahead. I may be in the minority, wouldn't be the first time. But my sense is, if we're looking at social and emotional health, you don't have academic performance if you don't have that. That's really a foundation. So my view is, and I realize this complicates things in negotiations, but my view would be to move forward with those at this point.
When you say those, which ones specifically?
I'm thinking about the interventionist in particular, and possibly special ed.
Okay. You want to have a discussion about that proposal, Kelly?
I think the idea that you can get the three positions for the increase of $93,000 is really something that I would like to move on, primarily because of the we've heard about the hiring pool and the competitiveness of special education teachers, and I do think that they would have. They have the capacity to have the impact on social emotional, but also to meet the needs of those kids where they're at. We've heard description of caseloads being too high for special ed teachers, and I would like to participate in creating some relief there and really working toward those 9 positions. It's no secret that I am a huge proponent of the interventionists. If we had to wait on those and we were utilizing, if we were thinking about those positions through the lens of individuals who have expertise in behavior or health, it's possible that those positions might be, as Anna has described, and it would be my assessment as well in terms of looking at employment pool from my own profession, that we could fill those later if we waited on them. But I don't know that for certain, because I'm not sure that that's exactly the criteria that they're looking for from the workers. But ultimately, I would really like to move on the special education teachers, and I really want to see those interventionists. I think we've heard from our middle schools that they're having increased needs. They're asking us to step in ways that will provide support to kids. And actually, I'm one of the things I'm reminded of, and I did want to bring this in. I saw Dr. Lane speak briefly on the CI3T work that she's done, and one of the statistics that she said that was really powerful to me is that we have 20% of kids in our schools that need social emotional support, and we're providing support for exactly 1% of them, because those are the students that are getting the support through likely through Medicaid dollars or through funding. And I think that if we move on those positions, we're making a dent. We're really moving in the directions of holistically seeing that CI3T vision realized. So I'm enthusiastic about those positions, and I am very cautiously saying that, given what we have to balance with teacher increases in pay, if we can and do that. But really, specifically, special education teachers, I do think the pool is such that we should move on that and authorize that minimally tonight.
Other thoughts?
I'm supportive of that as well. I'm not going to repeat everything Kelly said, but for the same reasons. I think as a board, we've talked a lot about instilling more supports for behavioral, social, emotional, and so yes, it's gonna sort of bind us a little bit, but it's in the large scheme of things. I haven't ever talked to a teacher or an administrator that hasn't said that these are a huge priority. So I think they're important.
Okay. I see a lot of head shaking. Does somebody want to make a motion?
I don't have a piece of paper to read.
On the fly.
Yeah, I move we approve to hire the 3 special education teachers and the 2 interventionists.
Second.
Beeson?
Yes.
Fincher?
Yes.
Gordon Ross?
Yes.
Ingram?
Yes.
Jones?
Yes.
Kimball?
Yes.
The motion passes 6-0.
Okay. Any other discussion before we call this one good for tonight? We're good?
Thank you, Kathy.
All right, thank you, Kathy. All right, we will move on to our middle school tech teams update with Jerry Kimball, Assistant Superintendent of Leading Learning and Technology.
Good evening. We're going to change the subject a little bit here. A couple of years ago, we rolled out the iPads at the middle school, and after the first year, we found that we were really taxing our media specialists in the library, trying to take care of all of the issues and all of the needs of the technology. So as we thought about it, we thought, well, you know, we really have some real tech experts in the building. They're a little younger than the staff, and so why don't we utilize their skills and talents to help us out? And we may need a little assistance from our guys in the booth here to get our AirPlay up.
It says it wants a code, and we don't see the code.
Okay.
I mean, my kids are amazing, but...
They wanted this to happen because they said, we can problem solve it while it's going on.
There we go.
See? There we go. So last year you were kind enough to allow us to have tech teams. And so we have tonight 3 of the sponsors with their tech teams to show you what they've been doing this year and how they have been utilized. I think you're going to be pleased to find out that it's not just all about the device. They're doing a lot of things with the work that they're doing in technology. So without further ado, I am going to turn it over to them.
Hi, I'm Chris Davis. I'm from South Middle School with the tech team.
Charlie Forsyth at West.
Josh Spratlin at LMCMS.
We're going to go through, and the kids are going to do a short presentation from the schools, and then we'll kind of see if there's any questions.
I'm Jacob Haney. I'm the 7th grader from West Middle School.
Good evening. My name is Isaac Riffle. I'm in 8th grade at West Middle School. And we came here tonight to talk to you a little bit about what we've done this year with Tech Team. So I want to talk about how it personally affected me and what it would have been like if Tech Team wasn't here. So for me, I learned a lot about customer service and how to work well and better in enterprise situations with my peers and with Mr. Forsyth and with other staff members to help them with questions they may have. Also, we try to alleviate a lot of pressure that's put on staff members with having to fix technology problems when we can do it instead. An example of that is with iPad checkout and check-in at the beginning of the school year with prep and the actual process of doing that. So we've compiled a short video here of what we've done this year to show you guys. So yeah, thank you for your time.
Feels like 100 years. My dreaming is gone.
Members of Southwest Middle School could not be here tonight, but they did submit a video that we wanted to show for you.
Actually, it's a 16-minute long video. We'll show you the first minute. Maybe not.
Hello and welcome to Southwest. We look forward to you joining our Bulldog family. At Southwest, we strive to be our Bulldog best aligned with the school-wide expectations of responsibility, actions, voices, and engagement. For our school to be our best, we need your Bulldog best. There are numerous ways to get involved at Southwest. Here are just a few of the clubs offered at Southwest.
I'm in book club, and we talk about books, or what we're reading, and if we're gonna go to the movies.
I'm in drawing club, and in drawing club, you can go during lunch and you basically just draw.
In RISE, we talk about certain issues in the LGBTQ plus community, and we learn about equality.
Hi, I'm Abraham Roman from LMCMS.
I'm Owen Musser.
We're here to talk to you today about what the school has been working on for the past year.
So we plan for the future year to create a newscast for our classmates and all that. We are hoping to assist with the transition from the Skyward system to the PowerSchool system and help both the students and the teachers with the new software. We want to create a lunchroom display, and we're looking forward to integrating coding and robotics to our tech team.
This is a sample of one of the videos we worked on. It's Stomp Expectations and Behavior During School.
I got this feeling inside my bones. It goes electric wavy when I turn it on. All through my city, all through my home. We're flying up no ceiling when we in our zone. I got that sunshine in my pocket.
What is STOMP? STOMP are the daily expectations we have here at LMCMS. What does STOMP stand for?
Self-controlled, trustworthy, optimistic, motivated, and prepared.
Self-control, trustworthy, optimistic, motivated, and prepared.
Where do we stomp?
When we move, well, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel good creeping up on you, so just dance, dance, dance.
How do you show stomp?
How can you be prepared in the classroom?
You have to have all your stuff, like your iPad, make sure it's charged, a pencil, your books and paper, and all that stuff.
What does self-control look like in the cafeteria?
Don't yell or scream and walk in the line respectfully.
What does motivated look like in the classroom?
Well, when the bell rings, you should always get to your seat. You should don't complain about your work. You may think it's pointless or something like that, but eventually it probably will come in handy if you know that like knowledge is important and just keep doing it.
Why do we stomp? We want LMCMS to have a positive atmosphere that is welcoming and safe for everyone. Look for the STOMP matrix all around LMCMS to make sure you are following STOMP behaviors.
Hi, my name is Jack Ritter. This is Timo Webb and Perrin Golter, and we are from South Middle School.
So every day we have a lunch keynote that we put up on TVs, and every kid in the school sees it, and it explains the expectations and lunch information, and it has some games and fun facts about the school.
We have multiple examples of these slides on the TVs that you will see. It can be advertisements for school events, like if there was a bingo night or a track event. It can also be Jayhawk News. It can also even be a game, like what we're seeing on the screen right now. Where in the school is this? It says, where in the school is this? And we take a close-up picture of a picture or a wall or something, and we say, if you guessed here, sometimes we say you're wrong, but in this instance, we said, you're right. We also show the lunch expectations because we want students to respect our teachers and, not just like throw food all over the place. Throw it away in the trash can.
We get the point there.
Okay. This is one of our games that we play with them. Why did the smartphone need glasses? Because it lost all its contents. We can also display student work, for example, from Mr. Davis's Photoshop class or from Miss Myhouse's art class, or if a student just wants to email us and say, hey, this is my hardest work. I really want you guys to show this. I really want to be cool for all my friends. It'll be up there.
Another thing we do is we do Google Classrooms, and Google Classrooms is basically just a way that students can give us information that can go up on the slides, and they can access it anywhere. On the handouts, it shows all of the different Google Classrooms. Clubs and intramurals, sports, 7th grade announcements, theater, and music are just a few of them. This is one of the advertisements we put up on the screens at lunch that showed you can submit pictures. This was one of the pictures that is Mr. Davis and one of the kids from our school, and it got sent in, so we decided to put it up. This is our CI3T matrix that we put up on the lunchroom presentation to show how you should act around our school.
This is a video from our 7th grade science teacher, Miss Busby, explaining the importance and helpfulness of tech team around her classroom.
All right, I'm here to tell you how much I appreciate the South Middle School tech team. They solve problems on a regular basis in my classroom, especially at the start of the year when students are trying to figure out how to connect to Google Classroom, how to connect to the internet, and so on. They are a very reliable group of students. Most recently, I had a tech member step up to the plate when we had a guest visitor from another district here who was having trouble, and it was just great to show that person from outside what a wonderful tech team we have here at South Middle School.
All right, so to close, just a couple thoughts. First off, I kind of, more than anything, come from a coaching background, and the technology thing was new to me this year, doing this. It's a really vibrant part of our community. They love what they do for the teachers. They love helping out in class, and then it grows. It goes from those 17 kids understand how to fix something to someone else, and before very long, we have 100 kids that know how to fix a problem. And when you get 600 iPads thrown at you and you're starting a deal, trust me, this is a big deal. So, all right.
One of the things we're trying to do going forward is we've kind of established a group that is between us as adults and also the kids tonight, that we want to be more collaborative going forward. So being able to do some projects between schools and things like that.
And it seems like as the district went one-to-one, there was an immediate need for help with those devices. And the tech teams are that immediate help in school, in the classes, and it alleviates a lot of the phone calls that happen here at 8 o'clock every day. You know, we have those kids coming in and getting help from us. And it really empowers the students to be part of that.
All right, we appreciate your time very much. Does anyone have any questions? All right, thank you very much. Have a great night.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and congratulations on a great job this year to our students and our staff. Thank you very much. Okay, our final item this evening on reports is a report on the draft fundraising policy with Kathy Johnson, Executive Director of Finance, and David Cunningham, our Executive Director of Human Resources and Legal Counsel.
we've been working on this for quite a long time now, and we have obviously loaded with the agenda, the board enclosure, and this is the policy that the committee has revised after receiving feedback initially from parent-teacher groups, site councils, principals, et cetera. So we have from the original draft that you saw some time ago, this is like the third iteration. This particular variation answered most of the questions that came out of the overview with the various groups. We also put together, actually Kathy put together a Q&A document that's uploaded as well that helps to explain to people those things that seem to be the most challenging for them in terms of, okay, if it's a PTO and we raise money, who owns this money? Who can decide what to do with it? So we have Q&A that will answer those questions. After developing this version, we sent it back out to principals and have not heard a great deal from anybody in terms of issues that this particular draft raises, with one exception. I think Shannon and Kelly are going to visit with the board because it's really a policy, not so much a technical question related to that. So this draft, the Q&A, seems to have addressed the majority of the questions that came out of our first conversation about 6 weeks ago on this particular fundraising policy. That kind of sets the stage for board members to discuss.
And I'll jump in at that point and just kind of go back to, for board members who weren't on the board when we first started talking about some of these issues. The discussion that has resulted in this proposal really started more than 3 years ago within the policy committee, because Kathy brought to us a need to have some broader discussion about business practices, which include fundraising of our, particularly some of our parent and support groups. And one of the things that came out of that broader policy discussion about that guidance was that we had some policy areas on some specific issues that maybe weren't really either meeting the needs that we have or maybe didn't exist at all. And fundraising was one of them, particularly with the advent of a lot of online fundraising venues and some different things that have happened. So we've been working through, over the past 3 years, policy discussions around a number of those issues, this being one of them. And it's really, the purpose of having a fundraising policy is to outline some best practices for safe and accountable fundraising, particularly as it applies to fundraisers that are run by district staff and students. So this is, this policy is binding on district-sponsored fundraisers. It would be considered best practice advice to our PTAs, booster clubs who are doing fundraising to then either donate money to the district or donate a thing to the district. One of the things that we want to do that we've talked about, wanting to be sure that we're promoting safety of students and staff and financial accountability that complies with a whole host of federal and state laws. There, particularly there's some IRS implications and things that can be very tricky around these issues. And so we've tried to capture all of that in the draft policy. One of the, we've had examples over the years that I've been involved with policy about problems that have come up when groups didn't follow good business practices, didn't follow the kind of guidelines that we're codifying for them. And so this is really designed to help and encourage mutually beneficial relationship between groups doing fundraising in the district and making sure that we're supporting all of our needs. Dave touched on some of the process. The policy committee has been involved in reviewing our existing policies with this great deal of assistance from Kathy and David and staff, drafting the initial policy that the board saw, revising that draft and developing the FAQs. sending it back out for feedback. It went to all of the building leaders, and we asked them as part of that communication to please share it with all of their site councils and PTOs. And we had we made sure that those individuals that contacted us last time about the first draft got the revised draft, so they had an opportunity to provide feedback if they wished. The one piece of feedback that we got on this final draft that we really haven't resolved is something that relates to the door-to-door sales language that's in the policy, and Kelly's going to get to that in just another minute here. Some of the key benefits that come out of having this policy: it encourages communication with building leaders to ensure that fundraising efforts are meaningful. We've had instances where funds were raised for something that either the district wasn't really involved in, and wasn't necessarily exactly what we needed, wasn't necessarily compatible with some of our either policies or facilities, that sort of thing. So, in order to create good communication, encourage good communication at all levels, make sure that building leaders are involved in these discussions. As I mentioned, promoting good business practices, especially as it relates to the IRS implications, creating good practice around handling of funds, making sure that we have policies, a procedure in place that helps protect our staff and parents from liability or possible accusations of mishandling funds. We don't want those kinds of things to happen, so we make sure we have good policy to back that up. One of the things that has come up in this discussion, as I mentioned, with the crowdsourcing websites, there's a whole variety of those websites out there, and they have a pretty broad range of ways that they do business. So some of them charge minimal fees, some of them charge pretty hefty fees, some of them allow you to submit your own language in terms of the purpose of the fundraiser, some of them don't. And so there can be issues about what you're advertising to the community that the fundraising is for versus is that really what the funds are intended to do. And so we needed some policy to help our building leaders, our groups, and our business office make sure that we're avoiding those kind of problems. One of the questions I wanted to be sure to answer, in terms of the crowdsourcing sites, the business office has done some investigation already into some of the sites that have been used for fundraisers recently, and will be coming up with some recommendations that will then be shared out with building staff about, okay, these are sites that our staff has vetted. They have good fee structures, good practices. They allow us to customize the fundraising language to make sure that we're able to communicate clearly what the purpose of the fundraising is, that sort of thing. So that's something that we're still working on, but will be shared back out to groups, the groups that need to have that information. So a lot of the tension that the board heard about last time in regard to whose money is it, I think Kathy really answered that through the FAQs and through the reorganization and redrafting of the policy to make it clear that this is really talking about the funds once they come, if they're district funds. And so that second draft of the policy seems to have really allayed a lot of those concerns that we heard. The one issue that really I think the board has to grapple with and decide is the committee's recommendation about the door-to-door fundraising practices. And so I'll turn it over to Kelly to talk about that.
Sure. So I want to start by framing the issue around Liberty Memorial Central Middle School's fun run, because that's really the primary event that we've heard about that will be impacted. So I am a Central Middle School parent. I want to make sure I say it right. Liberty Memorial Central Middle School parent, right? And been that for about 5 years. So, and I've lived in that neighborhood for 16 years and have, not every year, but most years I've had a child knock on my door and ask me to donate money. And even though I'm about to make a recommendation for prohibiting that practice, I will say that those conversations have been really ones that I love, and I love connecting with the central community. The goal for that particular fundraiser is around, they try to raise $20,000. I spoke with teachers to ask what do they use those monies for. They talked about using the money to for field trips, for classroom supplies that they might not, that fall outside of the norm, scholarships for art center classes, things that is pretty similarly used in other middle school fundraising. What I also asked kind of to get an idea, are the donations that they're getting made primarily from individuals that are unknown to the students, or are they primarily coming through as donations that the students know as they're collecting those donations? And that you might not be shocked to find out that they don't have time to investigate that. So they didn't really have the answer for me right off of the bat. But I did want to just acknowledge the importance of the fun run, importance of it to the community, importance of it to my very direct community, and hopeful that even if we make the recommendation to prohibit door-to-door sales, that the district will move in a way to help support them, thinking about how can we do this in a different way, in a safer way for students that might help them still achieve that goal of getting to $20,000. Are there different ways that they could potentially participate in that particular activity? And as someone that does fundraising rather routinely in my career, I know that when you have a formula, it's very hard to veer from that formula, and I know when I'm asking that we change that, that's a big ask. Okay, all of that is set up for this. So professionally, I have done in Lawrence hundreds of home visits, hundreds and thousands if you count the duplicated homes. And I have seen Lawrenceans rise to the occasion. If you come to the door, whether I'm there to provide services for someone that is at end of life, or I'm there to investigate abuse and neglect, they really are gracious hosts. And I suspect that 90+% of them greet our students that way when they knock at the door. But I would be remiss if I did not say to you all that there have been occasions when I have been in very, very complicated situations where my life was at risk. And I don't want to spend too much time regaling you with stories that any visiting nurse or occupational therapist could also share with you, but I do want to say, just in case your head is full of cobwebs of picturing this kind of not so great neighborhood and a kid is knocking on the door, asking for donations. The last time I encountered an individual who really, in my professional opinion, I thought was quite capable, just happened to be having a delusion when I knocked on the door, and it could have been anyone. And for that individual at that moment, I was the invader, and they were the protector of their mom and of their home. And I was on their private property where they felt like they made the rules, and they did greet me with a knife. And I had to act in a way that I am professionally trained to do. And not only am I professionally trained to do it, I train other people to consider that. I've also done a lot of canvassing for some of your campaigns. I have canvassed, and for bonds I've canvassed. And so I know a little bit about knocking on doors when people are not expecting you, and probably in a way that most of you do not. And it is my professional recommendation that we do not put children in this particular situation. And I wanted that extreme. I try really hard not to make decisions based in fear because of what I do for a living. So I want to just give you this very subtle example. My daughter, I really wanted her to be part of this activity, this fun run that has been part of my community. And I said, okay, I'm going to put aside my fear and I'm going to let you go. She had 2 friends. I had take your phone, take your little sister. So they're 10 and 12-year-old girls going door to door. They knock on a door. A gentleman says, come on in, it's a little bit cold. And they step inside of his house. Now, they wait there for a while, and he goes back and says he's going to get a check. And honestly, it might have been the amount of time that it took him to write a check, but they started to feel afraid. Or they thought maybe he was making fun of them. Or they reported to us that maybe he forgot about them. In each of those cases, they did not know what the right thing was to do. So they were assessing in a flash the things that I have spent 20+ years learning how to assess on the fly. And they did a good job. They got out of the house. But I don't think we want to be in the business of saying to people, to the students who maybe don't have parents with that have the ability to micromanage, essentially, this kind of fundraising, to say these are the parameters for which you can fundraise. Because I acknowledge that parents are the experts of their kids. They know their limitations, they know their strengths, they know their neighborhoods. But for those kids who do not have parents that can make those types of choices, that's the question in front of this board. So it's not, to me, it's not that I want to dismiss the question of parent right and the right of the building community to make this decision. From my perspective, to the board, it really is a question of, are we doing the right thing for the kid, right? Are we putting them in a situation we feel comfortable with? If a child is a very aggressive and very successful solicitor of funds and raises $200 or $300, are we comfortable risking that amount of money in relation to their safety, right? And then this question about the district liability. Now that we have looked at this issue, we have examined it, if we say we are not going to prohibit it, we are explicitly endorsing door-to-door sales. We are comfortable with that situation. And I'm not a lawyer, but I feel like that sets us up for a liability situation that we really don't want to be in the position of it not being tested to find out. We are, as a board, called upon to protect the district, and I think in this case, there are liability issues that really make us have to protect the district, protect the teacher. So as the example of Central Middle School, they are doing good diligence and explaining to the kids, these are the safety criteria, this is what we expect for you. But what if that teacher doesn't get it quite right? Or that parent, or the person that's talking to the children doesn't do just right? What kind of liability is that staff member incurring? I don't know, but it makes me uncomfortable. It feels like I'm not protecting the staff. I'm not acting in a way that's in their best interest. So you can tell I've spent a lot of time looking at this and thinking about it. I hope that you will join me in supporting the policy as it's written. I hope that as a board we will move to help Central Middle School, who really could use, just generally speaking in terms of the fund run, could use some support to look at ways that we might be able to reinvigorate that particular fundraising activity, generally speaking. So those are my main points. I mean, I could tell, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children really advises that we do not endorse or that we prohibit door-to-door solicitation as well. There are many districts that are wrestling with this. I've seen some statistics. I can validate the numbers, but it looks like this is a very common issue in front of boards. I had a parent ask me at New York when we initially said we really don't think that kids middle school and under should be doing this. And this mom said to me in New York, if you're not comfortable with my 13-year-old doing it, why are you comfortable with my 15-year-old doing it? And I thought that was quite a good question. So I got to a space of thinking, really, we shouldn't be in the business of door-to-door solicitation.
Thank you, Kelly. We have spent a great deal of time on this particular aspect of this policy because it is one that the community came back with some concerns about, and board members. And I want to acknowledge that there's there are some concerns out there about it. Jessica had to leave early, but she did want me to mention to the board to think about the equity implications of this. Yeah. And that's, so I think it's important that we acknowledge that that's a concern for people.
And the way that Jessica framed it is really important. So I want to put it in front of you. She did mention that Central is one of our schools that has the most at need families and kids, and that really we want to look at ways to support them. And when they have to take a hit, even if we're saying like, okay, this is going to be a $5,000 hit, that's a big deal for them, and I want to acknowledge that. And I do think it speaks to equity. I just, ultimately for me, I fall into this space where I think, okay, we just need to reinvent, not just because it's going to be tricky, but we do need to think about fundraising differently to be protective and good stewards of the students and of the district. And
I'll share sort of where I got to thinking in the way that led to the language that we are suggesting to the board, which is, this policy is really talking about district staff and district practices, and we're not we can't control what PTOs do, and frankly, we can't control what parents decide to do, right? But we can say that we're not going to actively encourage that kind of door-to-door sales, and it happens a lot. I have kids. And it's not a what part of town thing where you live, because I have kids come by my house all the time, raising money, particularly for sports and music and selling things. And 3 out of 4 times I know the child and they're close neighbors. And I suspect that even with this policy, people are still going to say, well, you know the 5 people that live up and down that side of the street pretty well. Why don't you just go talk to them? And there's a big difference between that and the kid that's going out in the neighborhood to the doors of the people that they don't know and the unknowns that entails. And
yeah. And carrying cash,
carrying cash, right? We've talked about the carrying of money, and the example that Kelly shared about the safety of students and not really being prepared to deal with the kind of situation that they may find. I said earlier in kind of a gut reaction to some of this, that if we have to give them a safety lecture before they go out and do it, why are we asking them to do it in the first place? And so that's our recommendation to the board. And at this point, it's really kind of, we're putting it out there to see where that's going to go.
I'm persuaded. Support it.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the way that it's written. I mean, I think Kelly did a great job of explaining the thought process start to finish. I think I was in support of it before, but I think you did a great job of explaining both sides, but really the journey that got us to that point, and I don't have an issue with that.
I would say there was a lot of anxiety shared with me from community members, more at the high school, middle school level, about how is this going to tie their hands. I think that way and that's because there wasn't a policy in existence, and so you imagine the worst. I think the questions and answers you came up with really helped and actually mirrored a lot of things that I was being asked. And with just reading the policy, you can interpret it until you've actually seen it in practice either way. So thank you for doing that. I think it makes it more clear and less and there's less projecting restrictions or stifling feelings. So I think with that, I'm okay with it.
Well, thank you. I kudos to Kathy and to Dave for all the work that they've put into this. And I think I just want to make the point too that throughout this conversation, we've tried to make sure that what we're doing, while recognizing kind of these best practices in all areas, that it's not meant to discourage fundraising to support our schools or to discourage those relationships, because those are incredibly valuable at every one of our buildings and across the district. And I'm grateful that we have so many members of our community that step up and support our kids through those efforts. We're trying to just make sure that we do that in the most thoughtful way that we can.
I think ultimately this particular policy will help them and support our teachers and students that are moving forward to raise funds on their individual buildings' behalfs.
Okay. Well, any other discussion or questions?
So procedurally, between lines 17 and 18, we do need to insert a new heading.
Okay.
Because these are some specific things that cannot have fundraising done. So we'll come up with a heading to put in there.
And this was on which page, Dave?
Page 4.
Page 4, okay.
Between lines 17 and 18. So we'll come up with an appropriate heading there. That would be the only change. It will come back to you in final form for approval at your next board meeting.
And unless board members request otherwise, our normal course would be to put it on the consent agenda at the next meeting. obviously you can pull something from consent if you have concerns or questions at that time, but just to make sure everybody's on the same page, okay? All right, thank you, Kelly.
Thanks.
All right, and with that, we've concluded our business for the evening, so one more motion, please.
Adjourn. Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.